Well, welcome everyone. We're very happy to have you here aboard National Geographic Orion as we travel through Indonesia from Singapore to Raja Ampat. This is a beautiful and diverse part of the world, and we're going to have the opportunity to explore an incredible country. Indonesia spans the same distance as the continental US. It's an island chain, 17,000 islands, and we get the opportunity to see both the diversity of the natural world here and also this amazing culture.
Well, one of the reasons that I'm still here in Indonesia after these 40-some years is because it's still so fascinating. It's an island nation of some 17,000 islands, and there are numerous different cultures on each of these islands as well. That means different food, different music, different language, different traditions. So it is a great smorgasbord of varieties of ways of being human, and still very little explored. This is a land of smoking volcanoes, and I love it because you feel as if you're living on the edge.
It's a very exotic destination for most of us, and often one that we don't really know very much about. But the thing that ties it all together is the sea.
Indonesia is a nation made of thousands of islands, and thus it is filled mostly with ocean. The Coral Triangle area, which encompasses much of Indonesia, is the most diverse place for corals and fish. It is certainly one of the best places to get in the water. The undersea world of Indonesia is one of the richest on the planet. So many different species, different shapes, colors, forms. Everywhere you look, there's life. Typically when we get in the water, people are instantly looking at the fish and the excitement, the movement. First you think maybe this bottom's just a bunch of rocks, and then you realize this whole structure we're snorkeling in, it is coral. The coral is the base of this whole tropical ecosystem, and without these coral animals, we wouldn't have all these fish, invertebrates, this amazing life that we come to see. So corals are an animal, they're a colonial animal, they're related to jellies or anemones. They have an algae living inside of them, so they're working together symbiotically, and they're making most of their energy from the sun. So when you look closely at a coral animal, you can see individual animals, individual circles or polyps, and they would have started as a free-swimming larva. They settle out and they start as one little polyp, and then they're dividing asexually. One splits and becomes two, and they just keep dividing. Very slowly for many, and some of them will live hundreds, if not up to 1,000 years.
Hey, there's a snorkeler.
This is a beautiful reef we've got here. It's very rich and diverse. A lot of different species, lots of designs and colors. But up here in the shallower zone, you'll find more robust corals. The ones that can take a punch, so to speak, you know, with wave action. Those big, heavy ones grow very slowly. Maybe only 5 millimeters a year, whereas, you know, things like staghorns can grow 10 centimeters a year, maybe 4 inches in a year. Yeah, there are giant clams all over the place. You can see them embedded in the coral. Nice giant clam down there. That one's pretty good size. But the clams, of course, once they get started in a spot, they're not going to move. And they're pretty protected growing inside the coral head like that, like these guys do. Look at the anemone fish down there. 2 of them with an anemone.
This evening, right during the middle of dinner time, we are actually going to be crossing the equator.
Are you going to speak to him up the front or?
I don't know. I haven't thought it through.
Yeah,
I'll follow you through.
so technically, I think this makes me a professional cross-dresser.
Yeah.
Getting paid.
You're getting paid.
Take that.
That makes
Bob.
it okay. That's why it's okay.
Yeah.
Part of your job description.
And I'm curious, is there anyone on board who has never crossed the equator on a ship before?
Oh, please don't raise your hand. Please.
Not a single person?
I'm pulling log.
Yeah, that's it. They usually.
Bow down to King Neptune. And ask forgiveness.
For what?
For having crossed the equator before. And kiss Agnes on the lips. No tongue. No tongue.
You can do it.
And now give her a strong drink to cleanse that palate. In fact, drinks for everyone on the hotel manager. Okay, he has to okay that yet. Don't where are the other volleyball?
We are lucky enough to be exploring the very remote and untouched forests around Kamai, and our destination today is Camp Leakey. Camp Leakey is a sanctuary found in amongst a tropical forest that is currently under threat. This unique sanctuary is the home of the Bornean orangutan.
And this is Siswi. And Siswi is the camp diva. And that's Percy, who's a sub-adult male. And he was posing very nicely.
I have always been interested in orangutans as long as I can remember. Certainly, part of their appeal is the way they gaze at you. It's like you are looking into the eyes of maybe not a human, but somebody who's very much like a human. I started my work in Borneo in 1971, and as the years wore on, it became very clear that our mission was not just research, it wasn't just conservation, it wasn't just education, it was everything combined, and that we needed to influence the world a little bit more. So a small group of us decided to establish the Orangutan Foundation International. Even in the early 1970s, one of our goals was to create an orangutan tourism, because we understood that if people had direct contact with orangutans, that they would be supportive of their existence on this planet.
These feeding platforms are really interesting places. It's almost like it's some kind of theater or concert. You've got your jungle surround sound, and everyone's coming in nice and quietly and taking their seats. The gibbon comes in. I think he's got really the best view. You know, there is a lot of buildup, and everyone can feel the suspense. I think we're all on the edge of our seats. Oh, here we go. And, yep, it's a squirrel. After this wave of excitement, the silent tension returns to the audience. And then, of course, right as we're all about to leave, the main event begins.
I found myself being very emotionally attached to them, and they, to me, seemed like almost like that they were humans. And what they do is when you've had babies, they do exactly the same behaviour. It's just amazing. And also when they're playing with each other, they don't hurt each other. You know, it's just that child play that kids do, or were used to be allowed to do. Yeah.
That one's a little bite. Okay, let go of my foot. That's my foot.
In the Orangutan Care Center, what we're trying to do is we're trying to give them the skills to go back to the wild. They know how to forage, they know how to make nests in the trees, they know how to deal with other orangutans. So by the time they're 10, they are usually ready to go. Orangutans are their own best ambassadors. I mean, they're sweet, genuine creatures that don't have a bone of malice in their bodies. I like to think of them as creatures who never left the Garden of Eden and therefore never lost their innocence.
Giving you the finger.
They do human expressions, don't they? They smile. What I noticed particularly was that they would be a little bit aggressive and then they'd have a big smile because they knew that something good had happened. So they were really, really very happy.
I personally think what draws the emotion from me is the fact that they remind me of people I know. I look at their different little faces and they look like someone I know back at home. So they're very, very much like small children to me, particularly these infants. And one of them, named Lucky, is only 4 months old and was found with dogs. And the reason they named him Lucky is because he's lucky to be alive.
I think the Pomoyo Foundation making the area.
All of them are orphans. Their mothers have all been killed, probably victims of palm oil plantations, and they've been taken out of their habitats and kept as pets before we received them. Our goal is we want to save wild orangutan populations from extinction in perpetuity. In order to protect orangutans, we have to protect forest. Without forest, wild orangutan populations cannot survive. So we are in the process of buying thousands of hectares of forest, and in saving orangutans in their forests, we save so much more.
3.9. Komodo National Park is just the most exotic, wild place you can imagine. And we're here in the middle of the dry season, which is the best time to be here as far as viewing wildlife is concerned, but it's also bloody hot. But we just have to deal with that. Of course, the reason we're here is to see the famous Komodo dragon. They've been around for millions of years, but they have been extirpated from everywhere else except for this few little islands in this tight group. This is the largest lizard in the world. It's a monitor lizard, and monitor lizards are probably the basic lizard type. They're similar to the prehistoric earliest lizards known. So these things are prehistoric looking. Everything about them kind of makes you think of the lost world. The fascinating thing about them is just recently it's been discovered that they're actually venomous. They have venom sacs in their lower jaws, and that's their strategy for taking down large prey. Because these things feed on deer and wild pigs and even water buffalo. So with a toxic bite, the animal that does the initial attack might not even get a chance to eat the prey. It might escape, but other dragons will get to eat it. So, in the long run, they all benefit from this strategy. And that means they're perfectly able to take down a human. And there have been maybe a dozen cases of humans being consumed, killed and eaten by Komodo dragons. And I'm sad about that, but it makes them even more exciting. We need our dragons. Dangerous animals make life worth living, I think.
That's some beautiful detail if you look closely at their scales.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually pretty nice light. It's nice and soft and shaded. Oh, we got one moving over there. Absolute amazing experience to be here today. This is something I dreamed about as a kid. I mean, real life dragons. This was awesome. These are, dragons that I read about in the National Geographic and watched them on TV and documentaries, and then to actually come here and see them in person and see them up close. And it was just amazing just to watch them sit there, with their forked tongues sticking out, and then, looking down the barrel of the lens and into their eyes, knowing that at any point, they're looking back at me wondering, if I'm on the menu for today or not. Yeah, he's gonna relax now. It's wonderful that Komodos are still thriving here and that they're protected here, and that we have this wonderful opportunity to come here and visit. And then to see one actually kind of charging at me was just awesome. I had to fire off as many frames as I could, and then, of course, you know, I had to get out of there. You know, being here is like stepping into the pages of National Geographic. To actually live a story and actually breathe it and experience it and smell it and take it all in, there's nothing like that. You know, reading about something is one thing, but experiencing it is a whole nother level. It's something that you'll cherish, and I know that I'll cherish for a lifetime.
We've barely been aboard this vessel for a couple of weeks, and look what we've seen. We've seen the deep jungles of southern Borneo, and then we've been on to Komodo of the dragons. And then within a night, here we are, for instance, in Flores Island at the moment, where you've got, I think it's 8 different languages in only a 350-mile long island, and the most wonderful ikats, textiles, arts that have been woven since before the first Westerners ever got here. Such rich ethnic diversity, such style, such art in their natural products. So, I mean, it's an anthropologist's heaven.
Please do not swallow the bitter nut. You just chew the bitter nut. Please do not swallow, and you just spit on the ground. Bitter nut is mainly chewed by women. It is a stimulant, so when they work, they always be accompanied by bitter nut. This is to keep them away when working.
How do you feel, Ken? Feeling the rush? Feeling a bit of sweat? Feel like you want to dance?
Welcome to Indonesia.
Chewing betel nut is an ancient tradition all through Asia. And while there are some concerns about long-term hazards of its use, our little experiment today is quite safe and gives us a good taste of their culture.
I tell you that you split the wrong end.
I did the wrong end?
This is one of the neatest lizards in the world, right up there with Komodo dragons. It's a flying lizard. It is so cool. He just flew right into us.
Now is the time to join them dancing together. please run. Let's dance together.
As an anthropologist, and specifically as a psychoanthropologist who deals with the range of the human mind and what it is we bring to the world, each of us in our different tribes, I enjoy seeing this amazing clash of different cultures. Our own culture coming face to face with this culture here and being asked to dance together and to drink and to chew betel nut together. It's a fascinating mixture. It's a real piece of human alchemy. Westerners very seldom visit this island, even in this day and age, and that's why they still greet us so warmly. And yet they have a great love for the Western culture, and they take little aspects of it, and it's stamped throughout their culture in the oddest of ways.
Once again. Okay. One song, 10,000, eh?
Banda, one of the most sought-after volcanic regions in the world, a tiny group of islands cast by itself hundreds of miles from the closest land, sought after by the great explorers since the very beginning. Christopher Columbus was actually looking for a shorter route to this very group of islands when he sailed westwards and inadvertently bumped into America. Spice, of course, wasn't just for making their food taste nice. It enabled the Europeans for the first time in history to actually preserve their food, tasting nice, across the seasons, because until then they only could salt it or dry it. But now it was an antibacterial that gave it a delicious taste, and they finally could build up great warehouses of these foods, and therefore people could buy and sell food for the first time. First it was found by the Portuguese, and then it was found by the Dutch and the English, who fought over it for centuries and built these great forts, which now linger here as a reminder of how powerful this was as a center for the trade in the distant past, every bit as powerful as the oil trade is today. This was the home of nutmeg, the gold of the spice trade, which drew the first adventurers in search specifically of this island because nutmeg was worth more than its weight in gold. And of course the spice evolved in this particular distinctive aromatic chemistry of the volcano, Gunung Api. These volcanoes, like everywhere else in Indonesia, are both bringers of death and givers of life. And we thought that this eruption in 1988 had completely destroyed the coral reef beneath it. But within nearly 10 years, this beautiful reef returned beneath the foot of this otherwise deadly volcano.
It's really amazing to see, after the fairly recent eruption, the return of the life to the undersea world here in Banda. The corals returned, and with it come the fish, monstrous schools surrounding us. What a lovely place. And just under the snorkel platform, what a find. Giant cuttlefish. This is one of the coolest animals undersea. Cuttlefish are a mollusk related to snails, but more closely related to octopus and squid. Incredibly intelligent, they patrol the reef looking for food, typically fish. And though we did have a marvelous day snorkeling today here in Banda, it is only a taste of what is yet to come in Raja Ampat.
Here at the end of this long voyage, we are in Raja Ampat, the Four Kings. This part of the world is incredibly remote, and the people who live here make their living off the sea. And in fact, the sea is really the primary reason that we're here, to explore that underwater world, see that rich marine biodiversity. It's an amazing place.
hornbill flying over. Oh yeah, huge honking red beak. So this beautiful parrot, find a big palm tree, and it's just to the right of the big palm tree.
Oh, it's beautiful.
We're ending this incredible voyage we've had after over 2 weeks at sea exploring the forests of Borneo, the dry islands of Komodo National Park, here in Raja Ampat in West Papua, Indonesia. And through your contributions to pristine seas, your willingness to travel aboard National Geographic Orion, to travel with Lindblad Expeditions, you are helping these communities to understand that they can share the richness of the marine environment, of their land, with us as visitors, and not necessarily extract resources from it. And Raja Ampat really is one of the budding success stories in the conservation world. Through active conservation by a number of different entities, the reefs are recovering. There are healthy reefs here. Sharks are returning, and being able to experience that in a world where the marine environment is degrading is really a special treat. So thanks very much for traveling with us here aboard National Geographic Orion as we sailed from Singapore to Raja Ampat. Hope you had an incredible voyage, and we really look forward to seeing you again soon.
Standing on the edge of time, walk away when love was mine. Up on the world, I'm feeling the climbing. Brilliance in my eyes, but nothing is rhyming over handling. When you came without taking, but I sent you away, oh man. So before they come to bring down the world, don't give me the light, just take it. Don't give me the light, just take it. Thank you.
What is a man? What has he got? It not been said that we has not to say the things he truly feels, and not the word of one who needs the records you Speedy Gonzales, away from Prairie Road. Stop all your drinking with a closing name road. Come on to your Toby, just let some man on the wall. My liver's flicking like a sailor, a lot of roaches on the hole. Speedy Gonzales, Speedy Gonzales. Let's rock, come on, everybody, let's rock. Everybody in the wholesale block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Spotted my players like saxophone, hitting those players, slaps on board. The time of my release, no way past just by. All the rhythm section was a purple. Let's rock, everybody, let's rock. Everybody in the wholesale block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Everybody in the wholesale block was dancing to the jailhouse rock.
How about that talent? Ladies and gentlemen, the crew show of the National Geographic Orion. We hope you've enjoyed everything tonight. Thank you for coming. We'll see you all bright and early tomorrow morning. Thank you. Well done, guys.